Welcome to Blue Compass, where in today's webinar, we're going to share 6 tactics that you can use to get more visibility in AI. It's something we've talked a lot about lately. It's incredibly important. You know, over the years, SEO has been incredibly important for your website to get more qualified users. But today, search habits are changing, and now it's incredibly important to get visibility in generative AI. So that means places like ChatGPT, or Gemini, Grok, Meta AI. These are all really important places for your brand to get visibility because it can lend credence to your brand, to your expertise, but also visits to your website. So with me today, I have Jay and Katrina, 2 members of our digital marketing team. And this is something that we've been talking a lot about for our clients these days. You know, beyond just these generative AI platforms that I've mentioned, Google search results now has AI overview in not every query, but many queries. You know, it's that space up at the top that will summarize, you know, some content from a web page. And so showing up in that too can be really important for brands. And it's something we spend a lot of time on for our clients. So I'll ask you a few questions here. We'll talk about 6 different things that people can do. Jay, we'll start with you. What is something that businesses can do to get more trust and authority in front of their audiences in an AI-driven search landscape?
Yeah, in some of our answers in your question, we rely very heavily on the principle of EEAT: experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. Those are the 4 tenets of quality content, and the same is true of AI. We can kind of go through those one by one. Experience is what actual experience do you have with this? What is your time within this space or whatever the subject matter is? Expertise is a little bit more in like, how do you show your insights? How do you show your unique perspective on whatever this subject matter is? And then authority takes you into a little bit more of that expertise. What does that mean for you as an individual? Drew's talked about this multiple times, but how do you kind of celebritize some of the individuals in your company so it's very clear that there's a reason they're talking about this subject? Why are you the one that's talking about something in this space? And then trustworthiness, this kind of along with experience goes into why are you a reputable source? How much consistent content have you had about this? And then why should we trust you over somebody else? So all of these are the same concepts as what we talk about with SEO, but with AI, it's a little bit more focused on how is that content going to be picked up by these platforms as opposed to Google just putting your information back out there for users.
I like to think about why should Google choose you over somebody else for this, whether that's Jay personally because he has experience with so many SEM-based things, whether it's why should Google choose to show Blue Compass as a whole when it comes to an SEO or a digital marketing topic, and what makes us unique in those things. And that's what we need businesses to leverage day to day. All of those things lead to that authority and that trust, and that's shown to Google in a variety of ways. But how many times are you mentioned alongside that subject? What value are you adding outside of what somebody else can add or what a different resource currently has available? And another way that we see that is the traditional old school, and I am rolling my eyes while I say this because it feels like the oldest SEO thing in the book, but do you have backlinks? Are other sites showing that you are a trustworthy resource for that specific topic? And if you are, we're indicating we should be the ones who are showing up, whether it's at the top of that page in that generative AI search, or should we be showing up in ChatGPT or these other AI-based platforms for this content?
Yep. And, you know, kind of like you referred to, Katrina, I think a lot of just very traditional SEO ideas do come into play here. Not everything, but a lot of traditional SEO best practices will help you get your brand more visibility in generative AI. And it's like, okay, if you are ranking, you know, in the top 10 in Google, that's a pretty good sign that you might be able to show up in AI search results as well. And one thing that's kind of interesting, though, you know, Bing has kind of seemed irrelevant, and sometimes marketers laugh at Bing like it's not as important.
We were literally just doing it this morning.
Yeah. But Microsoft obviously owns Bing, and Microsoft also has a relationship and some investment in ChatGPT. And so when you look at ChatGPT, if it's very important for you to show up there, sometimes it's really important to look at your Bing results and focus on that. And one thing that Bing does that Google doesn't do as much is Bing seems a little more focused on errors on the page. And when I say errors, I mean, programming errors, or also it can be words on the page errors, like, having multiple H1s on a page or things like that. So that's one of the things that Bing looks at. So, I mean, obviously having fewer errors on your web page is important if you want to rank in ChatGPT as well.
We were just digging around this morning and we were surprised by the difference in what's showing up for even our website between Google Search Console versus Bing Webmaster Tools. And like, you can tell what they care about, and it is such a different experience in both of those platforms. And luckily, if you're following traditionally good SEO best practices, you should be covering your bases across both. So it's nice that if you've got a solid SEO foundation, you're set up for success on both platforms.
It's a great reminder too of kind of what some of this conversation is about. When Google came around, we had to rethink about what is the internet for, what are websites for, because it created a new platform for that. AI is similar in that it makes us totally rethink how our content is going to be displayed, how is it found. So I'm glad we're having this conversation today for that reason of how do we reframe our thinking on this subject, and how it is similar to SEO, but how is it also different?
Yeah. I think it can frustrate marketers too, because as we see, Google's AI overview results at the top of the page, as we see, ChatGPT or whatever platform it might be, sometimes it gets frustrating because it's like they are taking our content and they're using it for themselves. And none of these platforms really want, same with social media, none of these platforms really want to send anyone to your website, unfortunately. And that's a bit of a game change, and we have to change our thinking about how it used to be, because, we used to think of Google, oh, it's just a place that sends traffic to us. But now it's helpful for us to also think, okay, our website is a platform in which we send information elsewhere. And that might not be 100% ideal. I mean, you do want people to come to your website, but sometimes it's getting harder to get those clicks. And there is, you can't fight it. There is opportunity in sending really good, useful content to these platforms. Again, because it can establish your credibility. You can get more visibility than your competitors, and it can still send links to your website.
I think that second to last thing you just said, if you're not there, one of your competitors is going to be there. So why would you not want to take advantage of that space, get that brand awareness, and get people associating your name and your brand with the topics that you care about?
Yes, that's true. Okay, Katrina, we talked about this in a broader scope, but more practically, what are some things that we could do? Is there anything just with the words on the page or the content or anything like that that people can do to update their pages to make it a little more visible when it comes to generative AI?
Absolutely. There's 3 really easy things that anybody can do, whether you know code or not, that we want to focus on today. So the first thing is the clarity of your content, making sure you're being as clear and concise with the verbiage that you're delivering on your web page. Don't add words just to add words. We want it to sound natural. We want it to be readable, but we do not want fluff for the sake of fluff. That's not going to help anybody. That's going to get clogged up in all of these generative AI results. They only have so much space that they can give for this, no matter what platform you're on. So don't add fluff where you don't need to. The second thing is focusing on heading tags and really following the SEO best practices that come with heading tag order. So you want a single H1 at the top of your page. That should summarize absolutely everything that your page is about in that H1. And then you want to follow down in a chronological order. So the next heading we should have is an H2. Then we go to H3s. We can pop back out to H2s at any time, but we need to be going in order. That helps with ADA compliance, so screen readers can easily make it through your pages. It also helps all of these bots that are crawling for this generative AI content to get through your page in an appropriate fashion. And then the third thing is using bullet points and numbered lists wherever it makes sense for your content. Those are really easy, really scrapable ways that these generative AI platforms can pull out content in a really easy to read, easy to digest fashion. People are often asking for like, what are 5 ways I can think about this? And when you're putting your content into that easy to digest format, you're automatically making it easier for these platforms. So really process, how would you want to read this if you were on the receiving end of this content? Make it clear, make it concise, use your heading tags, and then use bulleted and numbered lists where you can.
Yeah, that's really helpful advice. Absolutely.
Structure is so important because it makes the content so much more clear, even to us as users to have clear heading structures useful because they understand what's related to each other. But it's even more important when you talk about computers. They don't have that context of like, what's the style of the page? I know this is an H1 because it's a bigger heading. That doesn't matter to the computer. They just are seeing text. So if you can create that structure and that relationship because you've set it up correctly, that is a game changer for making sure you're getting content out there that's going to be understood.
Now, Jay, what about semantic SEO? Maybe first you could help define what even is that? What is that? And can that help you get more visibility when it comes to AI?
Yeah, so semantic SEO, it gets to the technical things we like to not think about on the page. So the actual coding of the page,
Mhm.
making sure we have all of those technical details in line. Katrina touched on this a little bit. Do we have the right headings? Do we have the right details? Do we have the right HTML elements on the page? That's the semantic SEO portion of this. But the big part of how we make that work for users is thinking about the user intent. What is the use case going to be for this user where they might utilize this keyword? When we thought about that within SEO, it was often like how to X or what about Y. Those are the way we thought about things. With generative AI, it's different types of prompts. So thinking about what is the user intent behind these prompts, does this make sense for SEO? Does this make sense for generative AI? A second key thing to think about is structured data. That's another very technical thing. I call it cliff notes for crawlers. It is just a snippet of code that I know, right? It's a little snippet of code that you can put on the site that makes it really clear what is this page about, and then what are the main elements you can expect to see within the page. Same reason we talked about headings being important. It creates a relationship and structure for these models to be able to adopt and understand what the relationship between things are. And then the last main thing would be making sure we're covering topics that are related to that. So much of what we're asking for, we always have follow-up questions. I don't know what your AI prompts look like, but mine always look like initial question. Oh, that brings up another topic I really want to think about more, and I ask follow-up questions. How can you do that within your content so that AI is not only tapping into the resource that is your page or the initial prompt or question, but what's the next thing that they're thinking about? This is also a really good SEO best practice, but the way we implemented it was slightly different when it came to SEO.
Absolutely.
I think that's such a great point, Jay. And that's why, a lot of times when we're working with clients, we'll encourage them to, have content about a certain topic in their industry, whatever that might be, that's really helpful. But then, okay, after you talk about it a little bit, does there need to be an H2 and then maybe an H3 that dives in a little deeper or talks about a detail of that? And it's also why we say, don't be afraid of a lot of content on your website. There's nothing wrong with having a lot of copy on your website. That can actually be really, really helpful. But just make sure you structure it well. Again, with those headings, make it really clear, make the copy concise, short paragraphs, bullet points, numbers, and things like that. You want it to be very scannable for humans so they can just look down the page and find what they're looking for. And so it doesn't look too intimidating. But also you want it to be scannable for bots, for search bots, for AI bots. And both of those things can really help it be scannable like that.
Yeah, I think the key thing you said there too was relevant. Like that's so important. Even when you're writing pillar pieces for SEO that are 1,200 plus words long, everything needs to make sense in there. You can't just throw everything that your site might be about on one page because it's really going to cover all your keywords. It needs to be relevant. It needs to all make sense together.
I was in a prospective meeting last week, and we had somebody say, like, if I can't get through the page in less than a minute, I think we have too much copy. And we're still breaking that down on a daily basis. So think about how these prompts are working. If you were to enter something into ChatGPT and you were asking about digital marketing, how many follow-up questions are you going to need to ask to get to the bottom of that? That cannot be accomplished in 300 words or less. We need to be going for that extensive copy on those single topics to make sure we're giving, if we want to be the resource in there, to make sure we're giving everything we need to for each of these.
And, for many years we have seen, and there's a lot of studies about this, that, the pages that rank the best in Google almost always have 1,000 words, 2,000 words or more. Why? Because they have the potential to add more value to the user than someone who has a page with 100 words. has to be well written. It has to be really high quality, but that's super important. That's incredibly important. And so often we tell clients, it might be helpful to consolidate some of the pages on your website. That might be important for you instead of just having multiple pages that just have a couple, 100 words on it. So I think that's important too. And before we get to number 3, if we can help you with any of this, don't hesitate to reach out to Blue Compass. We have a full team of digital marketers. We have a full team of developers. Not only do we build really solid websites that integrate these things we're talking about, like the Semantic SEO, really clean code, but we also do incredible SEO and AI optimization that get websites more visibility in search, get more quality users, and then ultimately help them convert on your website, more sales, more things like that. Okay, jumping into number 4. Actually, I think I was a little wrong there. Jumping into number 4, what about FAQs? FAQs are something we've done, these frequently asked questions. You often see them on websites, the question and answers. Those are kind of nice, but do those have relevance in this world of generative AI search?
Absolutely. FAQs and Q&A format for your content is absolutely critical to be showing up in generative AI. As we think about there's 2 different ways we want to go about this. What is somebody looking for if they're in a ChatGPT, in a Gemini type of situation? Normally they're asking questions. So we need to format our content in that. Ask a question, answer it as clearly and concisely as you can right after that question, and then give all of the follow-up resources that you need that are associated with it. The flip side of this is if we're thinking generative AI specifically in a search result. We always start when we're looking at picking keywords for our pages and deciding what we want. First of all, we have a rule internally that we always include 2 questions on any page that we're doing because it's just so prevalent in search today. Between the Q&A pop-ups, the generative AI search results, oftentimes they do include questions. So that's one of our internal best practices. But outside of that, we search for all of our keywords just in a normal search. Open up Google, start searching for what you're looking for, and how is Google putting that content together in front of the end user? When we started this a while ago, I used to think that we were smarter than some of the generative AI results. We're not. And if we are, it doesn't matter because Google's going to show what Google's going to show anyway. So we have to play their game. We have to format along the way that they are. And oftentimes they're rephrasing those keywords into a piece of a question in those generative AI results. So we might as well meet Google where it's at, put it in that question and answer format. And again, the biggest key to success here is that really concise answer right after. This could be something that we need 3 to 5 paragraphs to talk about. We want to put 2 sub-questions beneath it. Get those answers in those first 30 words that you're typing after that. 30 words is almost nothing. This is the hardest part of our job when we're doing copywriting, when we're doing quality SEO, is how can we make this as impactful and concise as we absolutely can. And we spend more time, honestly, crafting that perfect sentence or 2 right after our question and answer, because that's where we're going to see the success in all of this. So that's what's really important when we're thinking about these question and answers. Picking the right question, yeah, that's important, but getting that perfect answer right afterwards and then expanding on it beyond that, that's where the magic happens in the Q&A format.
I think you highlight a really key difference between what we focused on from an SEO standpoint when it came to FAQs versus when we're focusing on AI. Because when we would do keyword research on the SEO side, and we still do this, you're thinking about smaller chunks of things, like content marketing as a keyword. We'd consider that a keyword we might go after. You would not consider that a keyword you would want to go after just that term in the AI world, because nobody's just typing in content marketing into OpenAI. You might do that in search, and so it's just a different world. So by focusing on questions you want answers to, or that the type of audience you want to get in front of might have answers to, is such a great way to get started and really be thoughtful about how does AI fit into your marketing efforts or where your content should be focused.
We also like to, as we're strategy reviewing content, we like to think about somebody might just be looking at that question and that answer. So you have to make sure that the context of the rest of your page around that it matters and it's important, but are you answering without any of the context around it, and can it make sense if it stands alone? That's where you're getting quality content for these questions as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Another thing, Katrina, you mentioned that kind of resonates with me. I remember in college being in some sort of marketing class and them telling us how to write for newspapers, which seems pretty archaic, which is weird because I was just in college not long ago at
A
all
few years ago.
due to my extreme youth. And the idea was, when you write for newspapers, you write that headline and it's the most absolutely essential information from the story, and then the next line is the next most important information, and then as you continue down, it's a little less critical so you try to hit the most important thing is at the top. And I think that's really valuable too when you write for the web. I mean, be concise, get to the point, answer the question, get the sentiment of what you want to talk about out. You don't build up to it.
Yep.
And then the rest of the information you share, that's probably really important too, but maybe it supports that idea. And you can write as much as you want, you can have as much content as you want, but it has to be valuable and it has to ultimately support that main idea.
Absolutely.
And this is even more valuable when you're talking about things you care a lot about as a business. You have a strong opinion about something. We have strong opinions about SEO. We like to write content about that. If you want that idea represented in AI, you have to be able to distill that down to your elevator pitch in the first 30 words of that question. So being thoughtful about those things too. Where do you want to be a thought leader? Where do you want your ideas represented, whether or not you're present? What do you want AI saying in response to questions that you'd like to answer for clients? Because they're going to ask, and you're not going to be present, but you want that to be represented.
Yep. All right, question number 5. Let's get to number 5. Jay, this one's for you. Now, when it comes to the content that's most likely to be found by AI, do you think it's better for us to focus on like evergreen content that can last a long time, or should it be more timely and relevant? Does one seem to get more exposure in generative AI than another?
Yeah, you have to think about how these models work. So they're built on a data set, and that data set is from a specific time frame. And so in general, evergreen content is going to be better for you for that reason, because it lasts longer. It doesn't have to, the model, it's not as time dependent. Whereas real-time data like news and new launch events, things like that, AI is just not quite able to keep up with that because it takes so much time to train these models. So in general, evergreen is the way to go. It also, from an SEO standpoint, is a really great way to go to generate traffic. So there's a lot of the same principles there, but it's especially true on the AI side, just because it's usually not the most timely information that you're getting or that platform's been fed.
And I think people in general just right now aren't trained, to go to like a Chat GPT or a Gemini to get up to the date, immediate information. Now, Grok, which is X's AI, actually is a little different because it feeds into, all the posts on X. And so that actually can be a little more up to date, I've noticed, and that does a pretty good job of that. But yeah, same with like, Meta AI and things like that, generally not as much. All right, Katrina, question number 6 here for you. Let's talk about, how long it takes a website to load, the site speed, things like that. That's really more important than ever now in this generative AI world. Why?
It is so important that your content is easy to access. We've talked about how to make the content better, but if the bots and the crawlers that are supporting these generative AI tools can't get to it, it doesn't matter how much work we've done. So there's some ways that we want to help you focus on making your content easier to access. So the first thing is avoid any paywalls, any restrictive access, any pop-ups, anything like that. I know a few years ago, Google was talking about how when you have a pop-up on your content, they're like demoting that a little bit. And there are some times when it's absolutely necessary, but avoid that whenever you can. What's the quickest way to get the user to your information? Also the quickest way to get the bots to your information. So that's absolutely critical. The other thing you want to think about is optimizing your page speed. So if your page takes a long time to load, it's also going to take a long time for a bot to crawl through, get that information, get all of that content. So what can we do there? On the technical, if you're a little bit like me, less like Jay, not quite as code savvy and all the things, think about things like how can we crop the images down? How can we reduce the size of images to make those load faster? Do I need this video on my web page? Is it adding value? If yes, great, let's keep it in there. If it's just supplementary and it's not adding value to my content, let's take it out so my page can load a little bit faster. So there's things you can do like that. On the marketing side, we can also be really critical about how many pixels do we have loading on every page. If I'm not running, we have started to be really picky about that around here. If we're not currently running a campaign on Meta, we're going to pull the meta pixel. We don't need that running in the background all the time. If we're not currently using a UX tool like a Hotjar, like a Clarity, anything like that, why do we need those pixels taking time, slowing our website down? Add them in when you're using it, when you're actively collecting and analyzing data. Take them out when you're not. Also, you're going to get bonus points with your developers because they're going to be happy that we're not using our codes to slow things down. So it's a win-win there. So that's always great. We also want to make sure, leaning into a little bit of what Jay and I both talked about earlier, how can we make the code easier to read? We can add schema, we can add FAQs and things like that into the code. So give it that TLDR. Jay, how did you phrase that earlier? The
Cliff notes for crawlers.
Cliff notes for crawlers. That's exactly what we want to do. We want to make this as easy as possible for a bot to read. And this gets into, we sometimes get questions about, do we need to prioritize bots or people? The answer is always people. Always, always people. But if we can take an extra step and we can break that content down for a bot as well, you're just going to get bonus points with that when it comes to AI-based content. We also want to leverage proper HTML structure. So you want to make sure that you're using a content management system that is built with SEO in mind. So many content management systems just add what's called code bloat. So they've got extra code in there to make it work the way you see it in the back end as you're building your pages, but it doesn't actually help the end user on the front end, or it just adds extra code in there that doesn't need to be there. We don't want that when we're talking about this. You're slowing things down. You're making a bot crawl through extra stuff before it gets to what you want it to be paying attention to. And let's be honest, Google doesn't have the patience for us, let alone extra code, extra URLs, extra HTML. We don't want any of that. That's not helpful. And then there's two more things that we want to focus on here. We want to be using a sitemap. A sitemap is one of the easiest tools that we can use on a website. People aren't going to look at it. It doesn't look pretty. You can go to our sitemap right now. It actually loads as a white screen and all of the content on it's white. Absolutely love that because it's not for us. That is purely for bots. We are telling a bot when's the last time we updated a page on our site, when's the last time that we added new content to it, and how often would we like them to crawl each of the pages on our site. Super simple information, but let's get it out there. You get extra points if you're refreshing that every day and you're keeping up with the exact changes that you had. Sometimes they're auto-generated by websites and it's the last time you published a page, but if you can work within a content management system that gives you a fresh sitemap every single day to reflect your content, you're going to see better results in Google Search Console. You're going to see better results in Bing Webmaster Tools like Drew was talking about earlier. And then the last thing, we need to double check our robots.txt files. What the heck is that? Great question. We would love to tell you. Your robots.txt file goes through and tells you what a bot should be paying attention to on your website. It also tells what's allowed to be crawled versus what's not allowed to be crawled on your website. We have seen sites come to us and they're like, why are we not showing up in Google? Because the Google crawler's blocked in their robots.txt file. So that's always the first place we go when we're troubleshooting. If you want to take it a step further, include your sitemap URL in your robots.txt file. So it's really easy for a bot to find it no matter what that URL structure is. And those are some ways that we can, on the technical side, make sure that we're doing our best as marketers to get our websites to show up the way that we want them to, making them as easy as possible to be crawled, both by traditional Google search results as well as any of these generative AI results at the same time.
This is a place where sometimes we see organizations get into trouble because maybe they have incredible marketers, but the foundation, the website itself, just isn't the strongest. And sometimes, you know, you go for a real cheap WordPress website. It's not super expensive, but, you know, a platform like WordPress uses so many plugins. There's so much load time. The security isn't always the best. And so the foundation for some of the stuff just isn't there. So it's really wonderful when, as a business owner or a marketer, you have someone to support you. You have a really good IT team, development team. You have a really great foundation. We use a content management system called Slate because it loads really quickly, really clean code. It's wonderful for SEO, for generative AI optimization and things like that. But there are a lot of great platforms out there that you can use.
I love the point that Katrina made earlier about user experience being the big thing over bots. But also you have to take that into account though too. What do I need to put out there that is more for the bots or search engines? For example, Drew and I were talking the other day about video and how important video is and how great it is for user engagement. But also video is very hard for these bots and search engines to digest. So how do we make that simpler? transcription. You have a transcription of the whole video, and that's getting leveraged very heavily by these AI platforms because there's so much good video content out there, but there's not a great way for it to be broken down for those platforms. So small things like that, where is somebody going to sit and read the whole transcription of the video? Very unlikely. But these bots will, and it will make that usable and make that content more valuable than just to users.
That's a great point. And just as a side note, whether you want to rank better on Google or ChatGPT, both of those platforms really seem to love YouTube. And YouTube videos are a great way. And you show up in YouTube. So that's like 3 different platforms that really love that video content. It's a great opportunity if you're looking to get more exposure online for your brand. Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for your insights today, Katrina, Jay. We really appreciate it. And again, if we can help you with any of this, we're happy to do so. Check out bluecompass.com. That's bluecompass.com. You can see all about what we do here. Whether you have a WordPress website and you're looking to redo it, or you want just SEO and generative AI optimization help with your website, or you want a full new website, we have a full team that does that each and every day, and we'd love to give you a hand. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you next time.